You're listening to The Donor Doctor Show, where your host, James Newberry, will help you improve the health of your fundraising. Now over to James.
Hello, this is the Donor Doctor Show again. I'm with Ron Robinson of Young America's Foundation, and Ron is one of the most impressive people I know as far as being able to survive so many years and really thrive. Now, I know I've talked to your son, and you said you're a big fan of William F. Buckley.
Absolutely. He was the founder of YAF.
That's right.
At his home. And
in Sharon, Connecticut, right?
Yes, but was a big inspiration to me early on. I was an undergraduate from 1968 to 1972 in Buffalo, New York, and Jim Buckley was running for Senate in 68 and 70. He got elected
on the conservative line,
yes,
because the other vote split, right?
And Bill Buckley came to our campus and did a free speech for us both campaigns. So I got to know Buckley during that time period. Got to know the Buckley family, and was a big influence. Of course, he was the founder of YAF, along with Jack Kemp, encouraged me to become active in YAF, and that was my beginning 50 years ago. Almost 50 years ago.
Well, I go back to him in the 70s. I went to high school in Germany, and I had an English teacher. He was somewhat liberal, but not by today's standards, I suppose. I mean, he was open-minded, and he insisted that we read in the Stars and Stripes. They would carry him, and I'd have my dictionary.
Yep, you would need that. You would need that. Yeah.
And he would say that it only took him 20 minutes to write his editorials. Just amazed by that.
Yeah, he was truly a very accomplished individual. Of course, he learned English as a second language. He first learned
from
Spanish.
Mexico, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you think about some of the unique things of his life, if you were to do, a historic film or novel about Bill Buckley, there's a couple bookends to his life, or a couple, not bookends to his life, but a couple scenes in his life that if you put in the movie, you would say this is where historical fiction becomes too stretched and too absurd. He was with his dad on the tarmac when Chamberlain came back with the document and said, "We have peace in our times,"
wow.
Came back from Munich.
Right.
So you would just say, there was no way this kid, I think of 11 at the time, would be at that. And then when Roosevelt died, he was part of the honor guard when he was in the military.
Oh, wow.
And these are just a couple episodes in his life that are probably obscure. And as I said, if you did a movie and you had these scenes, you would just say, well, they're really stretching the parameters to bring in part of history.
I took my son to the documentary with him and Gore Vidal. That was, I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't see it, but I remember the original. I remember the original ABC
they
broadcast.
They really hated each other.
Yes, it came out. I mean, that was the beginning, I think, of really, critical commentary on different points of view.
Yeah, it was a lot of...
Which became quite popular.
Well, yes, it's a whole market there.
Yeah, it's continued to this day.
Well, part of your success, you've done a great job, but you're also responding to a market need.
Right.
Because there is a bias in colleges that's gotten worse.
Yes.
So bad that Bill Maher and Chris Rock, these comedians, they say they won't go to college campuses because they can't even tell their jokes.
Right.
They're microaggressions, and they tell you what you can wear for a Halloween costume, and it's just no sense of humor anymore.
Yes,
among some of these people.
Very ideological, very totalitarian instincts on the campuses today. No real tolerance of other points of view, of the conservative point of view in any case.
Or a religious perspective.
Certainly. And a good example is we had a professor when we were bringing Ben Shapiro to Cal State LA that said, this is a guy that is a series of microaggressions, and the way we should respond is with macroaggressions. And they attacked the students trying to attend. The university president tried to cancel the event. The faculty members were among those that block access to the hall to hear the speaker. So it comes from the faculty, it comes from the administrations, and there's definitely a segment of the students that pick this up and run with it.
Well, that creates an opportunity, though, and you've done a great job in you put speakers there. You try to combat this, so there's a need, and that's probably for any group to be successful. There has to be a need, of course. So that
I wish there wasn't a need.
Of course,
I wish that the colleges and high schools did their job in teaching people the conservative point of view, just as they teach the leftist point of view, but they don't. And it is unfortunately there's only maybe a couple dozen colleges in the country today that do a good job of presenting both points of view, including the conservative point of view. We know of some of them, like Hillsdale and Grove City, that resist taking federal funds, but there's about 2 dozen, and that's it, out of over 2,000 campuses in the country today.
I think it's a good thing to learn from somebody with a different perspective. I had a Marxist professor who was great. He was very informative. He's a little doctrinaire. That's how they are. But you can learn from somebody.
Right. I think that I'm also a lawyer by training, and you learn that you need to be able to present both points of view.
Right.
You need to even strengthen your own position. You need to understand the other side. That's not the position of most educators today, though.
Yeah.
They want to teach you what to believe in, not how to think. And it is very rare. If you do a study of the Nobel Prize winning writers on the conservative side, people like Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek, they're just not assigned on college campuses today, almost anywhere in the country. Much less
even at the University of Chicago or something.
Well, the University of Chicago's a great example. When Obama was there, and he had a couple lunches with Richard Epstein. Epstein, the free market oriented writer, said at the conclusion of the second lunch, Obama looked at him, and Obama was just an instructor. Epstein actually was a professor. And Obama just couldn't understand why Epstein would even be at the college, given his point of view. It was a case where Obama felt that only the leftist point of view should be taught at the University of Chicago. University of Chicago has taken a more positive stand in favor of free speech, and that is a big plus and a rarity in the country today. But give them credit for doing that recently.
Well, that is a big step. But as we said, one of the things that most impressed me is you had some vision. A lot of people that are directors, I'm talking about the Reagan Ranch.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that, how that opportunity came about. I had the opportunity to go, and I preferred going to the Reagan Ranch than the Reagan Library, and I'll tell you why. One, is exclusive because it's hard to get a ticket,
right.
So that's always something in any
right,
kind of.
Yeah.
You always remember that,
yeah.
Scarcity. But the other is, I like seeing what books they read.
Mm-hmm.
I got a feel for what he was like. The Reagan Library is not anything authentic to him. It's not even like I went recently to see the Woodrow Wilson Library in Staunton, Virginia. That's his father was a Presbyterian minister. You see the house he was born in. You get a feel for the guy.
Right.
You don't get that for the Reagan Library, really. You do see Air Force One. It's worth seeing. I'm not saying that, but I prefer seeing the LBJ Ranch to the LBJ Library.
And
that's me.
That's a great example. We can be more objective about it when we look. When I've done both, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I enjoyed. I wasn't a big admirer of LBJ, but I greatly enjoyed visiting the LBJ Ranch. It said a lot about the individual.
You just don't get that with the library.
You don't. The libraries are part of a government system that reports on their presidency, and we largely know about the Reagan presidency. Most Americans that are alive through those years do. You don't know as much about the man, even though he was in the public. The ranch really gives you his personal side. But I think the Reagan Ranch, for one of the reasons, of course, fewer people go there is because the Reagans chose it in a remote location.
Sure.
They used it to get away, and they owned it for 25 years. It was the only private home they had during the presidential years. So it's the only place in the country we can preserve as the Reagans had it during the presidential years. But for Ronald Reagan, it represented freedom. It represented the place where, for example, he signed a tax cut, the largest tax cut still in American history. and he did that intentionally at the ranch. He gave some of his most eloquent nationwide addresses from the ranch, particularly rallying the country to support solidarity and the freedom fighters.
He had a lot of people visit that were
and he had VIPs, absolutely. I mean, for him, it was a way to thank some of key leaders like Margaret Thatcher and Brian Mulroney, who was the Prime Minister of Canada, but also eventually an opportunity to meet with Gorbachev there as well. But the number of people he had visit was very limited. The Queen, I think, was very important for Mrs. Reagan to host the Queen.
It's not a fancy place.
Yeah, it's not.
It's nice.
And it was a horrible day when the Queen was there. It was raining. It doesn't rain very often in California, but that day made up for a lot of days when it didn't rain. But I think saving it said our movement was important. Saving it gave us really a site that particularly young conservatives can go to and understand the significance of our movement, what it did in the United States and what it did in the world, that there really is not other cases of that around the country. We talked about Bill Buckley. No one saved the Buckley sites.
Right.
No one saved Barry Goldwater sites. No one saved Milton Friedman's offices or anything like that. And so, when you think about the modern day conservative movement, it is it's certainly one of the largest movements. It's one that prevailed in the 80 and 84 elections and still is the major alternative to the left in the country today. And yet the Reagan Ranch is the only site in the country that is a specifically saved conservative movement site. And I don't think that's lost on our supporters. It is interesting, though, that to me, there was skepticism conservatives had at the outset that we would be successful in saving it. I remember people calling and saying, what happens if you don't succeed? And I just sort of laughed at it and just said, we're going to succeed. And, to me, it was something that we just were going to stick with until we had completed it. But I think there was a sense among conservative supporters at that time that a lot of the conservative institutions were short-term. You had to solve an immediate problem, and there wasn't a sense of a longer-term mission that sometimes universities have, sometimes
I'd agree with that. I
have.
think people are always thinking about the next year or two, the next term in Congress.
Yes. And not necessarily the next generation or future generations.
Did you get resistance did people buy on or not buy on? Did you?
We were very pleased at the reception of it. I do think that there was it taught me there was this great skepticism among conservative donors
when they've been disappointed so many times.
Well, I don't know that there was something at the time when we first stepped forward in 1998 that maybe conservative groups had not done significant projects like this, and they didn't see groups like ours doing something like this. But really, that immediately broke down when they had the experience you had to go to the ranch.
Oh, it is something.
Yeah, yes. And then when we were able to add the Reagan Ranch Center in downtown Santa Barbara, which was a much more expensive project. It was a $21 million redo of a hotel and making it earthquake-proof and so on and so forth to protect the Reagan items in it and the people in it. Those were, when people go there, I think it's transformative in terms of their view of what conservatives can accomplish.
It was impressive. I think what I most admired was how you, a lot of people, they get a donor through direct mail and they get a transfer. Let's say it's $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, whatever it is. And they just kind of sit on
Those are bigger transfers than most get, but...
but I mean, I've seen clients get that kind.
No, I'm only...
Yeah. And they kind of just sit on it. But the more they get, the less likely they're to do work. And you just see it as the beginning.
Yes.
Of cultivating a relationship. Oh, how do you cultivate these donors? I know you had one person give you a really large gift.
Yes, but first, we don't sit on it because our mission is to make sure young people have an opportunity to hear conservative ideas. And we're only scratching the surface of that. I mean, we put on several hundred events in the course of a year, but there's over 2,000 college campuses. So even if you're putting on at a good campus 2 or 3 events, you're only covering a small portion of the the 19 million young people in college. So our work is we still have a long way to go, and I think it's important that our supporters understand that. I think that conservatives are very, very generous people. Arthur Brooks, the current head of the American Enterprise Institute, wrote this book, Who Really Cares? And he documented how conservatives in every way are more generous than liberals. They give more to their churches. They give more to their universities. They give more to even on elementary things like giving blood. I don't know if you consider giving blood elementary, but even in non-financial areas.
It's a community spirit.
Yes.
Yeah, they're more community-minded.
And yet, having said that,
but that's not the perception. Most people would perceive that not to be the case.
Yes. I mean,
I would say it's probably the religious conservatives more than the non-religious. I don't know that, but I would suspect that a lot of that is from kind of religious training.
Yes. But even the non-religious conservatives still give more than the religious liberals. On the liberal side, the people proportionally most generous are minority religious church
I can
attenders.
see that, yeah.
But they still are below the lowest level of conservative givers. So it's very stark, the difference.
Well, I know like Utah is the number one state for both gifts and volunteering.
Yes.
So that kind of is
consistent
state.
with it. But why? But there's one answer that answers two questions. Why is this not generally known, and why do conservatives maybe not institutions get their fair share of contributions? And that is in part because the news media never highlights, never congratulates any of the conservative philanthropy. They vilify it. So the Koch brothers is a good example. They have been vilified for the last 10 years for being involved in public policy, trying to increase the chances of free enterprise in this country. And they're
known for the reform on prison reform.
They have done so many things, both in terms of developing free market ideas, but also even medical and cultural contributions. But there's this book by one of the writers, Mayer, I guess was her name, Doris Mayer, I believe, Dark Money, that has been on the New York Times bestseller list. The New York Times, just in wrapping up last year, said it was one of the best books of the year. It is a complete screed against conservative donors. I mean, I read the book, and these tremendous philanthropic individuals, the Kochs, the DeVosses, the Coors, the Bradley Foundation leadership. In the whole book, there's probably about 3 sentences, definitely limited to a paragraph or two, that says that these people have ever done anything good. Mm-hmm. In other words, these are some of the most generous people in the country. So what does this lead to? Conservatives are not going to pick up their daily newspaper and see the mainline news media congratulate Jim Newberry for his philanthropy. They're going to vilify whatever you do. And so there's no positive reinforcement anywhere other than internally for conservative donors to give to conservative institutions. So if I give to my college, a liberal Canisius, a liberal Jesuit-run school in Buffalo, and give them a big gift, it would be in the Buffalo News, and I would be hailed for great vision. But if I gave the same gift to save a great historic site like the Reagan Ranch, or to promote free market ideas and give students in Western New York an opportunity to hear a pro-freedom philosophy, I'll be vilified. I won't be complimented. The Buffalo News has never written a story saying, hey, this native of Buffalo, New York, saved a presidential property and took on a major project and made this succeed. So they're not going to give you that kind of affirmation. And therefore, I think it limits conservatives. And how do you overcome that? You overcome it by communicating directly with your supporters, by urging them to do site visits, to see firsthand. And we know it's transformational. Not just because they're seeing Ronald Reagan's books.
They're seeing the kids there.
They're seeing the kids. They're seeing people actually have done what they gave for, but they never have any other outside validation of that. Where on the left, you have constant validation of it.
One of the things I think that you do really well is you give the donor some immortality. You know, their name is on the chair. That's a powerful thing on my. I know somebody who went to the University of Buffalo in the 50s, played football for them, and their football program came back, and he was so proud. He paid $500 to have his chair or locker named after him,
right.
And he shared that with everybody. And people love to have something named after him, or you do that really well.
We're eager to give our supporters a chance. Particularly, we do it for all supporters of Young America's Foundation. But if a person gives to protect and save Ronald Reagan's ranch, they're on Freedom Wall at the ranch. It's true at the center. The chairs in the rooms are named after supporters, because it's an opportunity to underscore that they were part of making this possible.
I think it's a great thing. I don't know why people wouldn't do that. They don't want people to participate. They don't want to invite them in.
Right.
I think
some conservative groups miss that opportunity. If you go down to downtown Washington and go to George Washington University, every classroom, every bench is named after a supporter.
Oh, I noticed that. Jackie Kennedy, Onassis.
Right. I mean, literally every bench outside. And
I like that.
And yet a lot of conservative institutions seem hesitant to do that. But we want our students that are attending our programs to know that it was probably a sacrificial gift to someone to make their participation possible. And here's another important point, Jim. The leftist organizations thrive on getting coerced money, taxpayers' dollars, NPR, Planned Parenthood. All of them are lining up at the federal trough to get money. And so, as compared to conservative institutions, which rely completely on voluntary contributions. Michelle and I, in our own family, have a rule of thumb that we share sometimes. I'm glad to share with you. When someone asks us to give us a gift to different charities here in Reston, Virginia, for example, the local arts group holds an art festival, and they try to get a gift as you come in. And I always say, Michelle and I give a gift either through coerced money or through voluntary gifts, but we don't do both. You're going to give money one way or the other. So I ask them, do you accept government funds? And when they say yes, we say, you already got our support then, whether we had any choice or not. And so I think conservatives should think about that and support those institutions that are voluntarily based, that only people using their free choice to give to it do so.
I think you make a good point. I always, if a group doesn't get government funds, maybe it's just federal, maybe they get state. I would say we don't receive federal funding, or I think it's a good thing. Some people do care about that, so it's a good idea. Now, let me ask you this, because you've done so well in parlaying your direct mail into some major gifts. You have a lot of people, I guess, around the nation that help you out. I mean, how do you approach that? How do you know how much to ask for somebody, that kind of thing? I mean, do you have any tips for people? Because a lot of people out there, they're shy. This isn't taught in school, really.
No, it's not. It's not. And I think it's not a science, but there are a number of ways to make a decision on what to ask someone for. I would say first and foremost what they're most interested in. If someone says to me, let's say when Bill Buckley was alive, you ought to sponsor Bill Buckley, I would say, would you help make that happen? And it would lead to a discussion of what that might look like. So if we would go to supporters and say, we want to send a list of speakers to the college campuses, and they say, we particularly like this person or dislike that person or want someone else, it gives us an opportunity to talk about what it actually costs to do something like that and get them engaged. The individuals' federal election gifts are publicly available. You can't just take the list and fundraise from that, but you can look up my gifting history and you can get an idea of what kind of gifts I'm comfortable with. Michelle and I, gave more generously, for example, when George Allen ran for governor and senator. And so now we're bombarded with requests for exactly the amount. Well, you need to know the person. We knew Governor Allen. Michelle, my wife, served as president of Virginia's Board of Education when he was governor. So he's very special for us. But I think that you can get some idea of the level of comfort a donor may have or a supporter might have by what they've given. What you'll find, I think, is you either talk to the supporters, which is the best way to do it, although some are very hesitant to talk about their gifts. A lot of conservatives want their gifts to be relatively anonymous. But what you'll find is up until a point when they're in touch with an organization like Young America's Foundation, and then we talk to them about their philanthropy, they're giving more to liberal institutions than you would think. And they don't always know that. It might be their college, and their college isn't telling them what's being taught in the economics or political science classes. They're saying, Jim, you remember your good old days in college.
Yeah, sure, it's a strong one.
Play nostalgia.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the development offices at colleges and universities are much better than conservative movement organizations. But we can learn from them. We can take a look at what they do. We can take a look at the families that they raise large amounts of money from, and then look for the conservatives within those families.
Well, very good. I appreciate you coming on to the Donor Doctor Show. I learned a lot, and until next time, talk to you later.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you.